Right, my name is David Landini, and today I'm here with John Lolicato, and we're here to talk about the MDBA Basin Plan and the Pause the Basin Plan, which John is one of the initiators of. John is a farmer in between Barham and Warcool. He's the chairman of the Warcool River Association. He's on 13 different advisory and representative groups to do with irrigation. He has written an uncounted number of articles and attended an uncounted number of meetings to do with water. John, in summary, knows as much or more than anybody about water in the Murray irrigation area than anybody else. So, good day, John.
Thanks,
Dave. Thank you, John. And so, John, you're one of the initiators of the Pause the Basin Plan. But first of all, I'd like to ask, what is the Basin Plan?
The Basin Plan was an initiative that was put together by the Howard and Turnbull governments in the fact that they believed that there was a crisis that was happening in the river, and so it was they actually sold it as being a long-term plan for the Murray-Darling Basin. The problem is the real reasoning behind it was the federal government wanted to get control of water away from the states. Right. The Australian Constitution says that the states will control water that falls within their boundaries. The federal government was desperate to gain control of water, so they had to create a crisis. And the crisis that they created was that the Murray Darling was actually in crisis. Which really, it was at we had the millennium drought happening at the time, yep. Which was the thing that actually, they used that as the springboard to try to wrestle water away from the states, yep. And they successfully did that.
And I think at the time in the 2006 federal election, the Kevin Rudd and the Labor Party were making a lot of political mileage on the millennium drought and the perceived damage it was doing to the river system at the time.
Without a doubt, and you can't get away from the fact that at the time, and it still is the point today, that South Australia has got a number of marginal seats down there, and so whoever could woo the South Australians onto their side was more likely to get power, and that's what Howard and Turnbull tried to do. Turnbull was the architect of the 2007 Water Act that actually wrestled water away from the states, and as we know, we've ended up having they lost that election because it was hung to start with, and then the Greens gave the votes to the Labor, and we've had I think it's something like 7 successive prime ministers since then, yep. That have all learned to live the lie of the lower lakes and also the Basin Plan.
Yeah. So in summary, John, it had the Basin Plan has a lot to do with federal politics.
Oh, the whole thing is all about federal politics, yep. and end of system flows.
Yeah. So John, just quickly now, the Basin Plan is in power now, but what was there before the Basin Plan? Just briefly.
Oh look, you've got the River Murray Agreement. There's
between the states.
Between the state, that was in the Murray-Darling Basin, so all of the states signed onto that. Yep. You've got water sharing plans that all the states had that gave control over how water was used. We actually had a pretty good system overall. There was at the time they kept on saying that states were at each other's throat all the time, yep. But overall, we had a system that actually worked reasonably well. Right. Water will bring a few blues here and there, but overall it was shared properly. We've all got different allocation systems. Victoria's and South Australia's tend to be a little bit more conservative. New South Wales, we tend to grow our annual crops, but the balance worked beautifully.
Worked good, and I think historically, John, all the infrastructure in the system was built in that time before the Basin Plan came in, and I think since the Basin Plan's been in force, there really hasn't been any infrastructure development since.
Well, the crazy part about it, our forefathers acknowledged the fact that Australia is the driest inhabited continent in the world. Yep. We've got the most variable river systems in the world. Yep. We've also got an extremely variable climate. So but what they desperately needed to do, they needed some sort of nation building project, and of course that's where the dams came in. Yep. They needed to encourage people away from the coastal fringe, yep. And to inhabit the inland, and the only way they were going to do that is by providing water, yep. To the arid climate, the arid geography that we had inland. Yep. And look at we've got people that were wanting to move right through Broken Hill, a lot of the on the edge of the desert almost, yep. Provided you had water, yep. People would actually go and farm that country and we dragged people away from the coast, and it was actually a great initiative that actually the foresight that they provided was amazing.
Yep, that's right. So John, with the Basin Plan, how has the Basin Plan affected, just briefly, irrigators and also the local communities since the Basin Plan?
The crazy part about it is we keep on hearing that there's groups that don't want to plan and all. Everyone acknowledges there needs to be a long-term plan. Now we have had plans that the water was shared under for a long period of time. This was to go the next level, so everyone agreed, yes, we do need a long-term plan. But this plan has been the whole foundation of this plan has been based on misconceptions and misbeliefs, and so what we've got at the moment is a plan that cannot work. It physically and the volumes of water that they're talking about, the goals that they're trying to achieve through the long-term targets, physically cannot be achieved, because we've got the Murray River is actually quite a small stream in comparison to the other streams around the world. And to try to get the volumes of water that they're talking about to get from one end of the system right to the bottom is crazy and ludicrous.
Yeah, and John, there have been some organisations, for example, the United Dairy Farmers of Victoria in September 2018 put a report out from the Murray-Darling Basin Authority's own figures, and they state that there's been a loss of 10,280 full-time jobs in the irrigation area since the Basin Plan's come into force.
Look, that'd be fairly conservative overall, because there's a lot of flow-on effects, whether it's 4 times or 5 times that. There has been a lot of social economic work done over a period of time, and each one of those social economic studies, whether it's been done by the irrigation communities or whether it's been done by the MDBA, the MDBA's own figures clearly indicate that there has been huge job losses out of irrigation, out of towns, out of communities more so than anything, and the actual loss of irrigation water from those communities, that takes wealth away from it.
Exactly.
And that's the biggest thing that a lot of people don't seem to realise, especially in the urban areas, is that for every megalitre that leaves a region, it actually takes that income generating component with it.
Yep, it certainly does. And John, I probably shouldn't put words in your mouth, but would you describe that as an economic disaster for the towns in the...
Look, the crazy part about this plan to where it is now, it's not only an economic disaster, it's a social disaster, and it's an environmental disaster. Not only are they achieving, this whole plan revolves around, the precedence being given to the environment, but if you have a look at what's happening with the environment, we are overwatering a lot of sites. We're actually killing the river systems. The Goulburn, the Murray and the Edward rivers are collapsing in front of our eyes because we're trying to put too much water down to all the... it's not only just environmental requirements downstream under the Basin Plan, there's also extra development that's going on, and the river systems physically cannot sustain the volumes of water that are being shifted downstream.
So John, that's the Basin Plan. So what is Pause the Basin Plan? The movement that you and other irrigators have initiated?
Part of this whole thing is supposed to be about community engagement, consultation and being involved in the process. Now, I for one has been one, as you have, Dave, and plenty of other people in our community. When this first started, we thought, look, if we get involved with it, we'll be able to get a bit of logic and common sense back into the plan. So we're in the 7th year of implementation. Since 2012, we're in the 7th year of implementation. Now, in those 7 years, our communities have attended thousands of meetings. We've put in thousands of submissions to all the different brainwaves that come up at different times. We've tried to be involved in the process, and everything that we have said and done has fallen on deaf ears.
Right, with the MDBA and politicians.
Well, MDBA in particular, but the political imperatives have taken over from logic and common sense.
Right.
And whether you're talking about constraint strategies, trying to force water through the system, we thought, look, all we've got to do is highlight to them, look, you physically can't get that volume of water down there, so why would you have a target of 80,000 megs at the South Australian border? And we thought logic and common sense would take over, but it doesn't.
Right.
And so after 7 years of trying to have some input into trying to steer this plan into a direction where it might become a reasonable plan. We've said, look, it's just got it's going from bad to worse to an absolute disaster.
Right.
So now we're saying,
Pause.
We've just got to pull it up. We've just got to pull the plan up, pause it. pause doesn't mean bomb the plan, like Lolicato and a few of the other politicians have grabbed hold of this phrase and said, oh, it's about blowing the plan up. It's not about blowing the plan up. We do need a plan. Everyone acknowledges we need a plan. The fact of the matter is we need to actually just pull it up for a period. The plan is being sold to us as being flexible and adaptive.
Right.
Now, any plan that's flexible and adaptive, you have a period where you pull it up, you have a look at where you're at, and if you're heading down a wrong path, if you're actually creating, consequences that weren't planned for, then you'd actually try to adjust that. Whereas what's happened with where we are at the moment, because it's a political plan, there's a lot of money to be made by people, there's a lot of careers that actually revolve around this plan now, and so no matter what, we've got different groups saying on time and in full doesn't matter what. So what our group has said, enough is enough. We've actually done our bit, we've actually tried to be involved in the process. Now we're saying pull the thing up, there's been more than 70 independent reports and studies done, that's quoting the MDBA. There's been Senate inquiries that are progressing, there's even one at the moment. Each one of those have come out with different recommendations over a period of time, and some of those recommendations have been excellent. The problem is, not too many of those recommendations that I know of have actually even been addressed.
So pause the plan is stop, assess what's been done so far, and then after a period of time, proceed on.
It's really quite simple. The work's already been done. We don't even have to go back. Look, it's a $13 billion plan. There's $5 billion still remaining in it. Now, of that money that's still remaining, put it to one side. Put it into a closet somewhere. Leave it there for a period of time, because while you've got that $5 billion there, it is distorting the water market. It is not only distorting the water market, it is also creating division within our communities, because a lot of money being waved in front of people's noses. So we need to actually pull that $5 billion out, put it to one side, take it out of the water market, which will help to, at the moment it's being distorted. Government's prepared to pay a lot more for water than what the market will pay. So put that to one side. This pause the plan initiative, it's actually, whether we call it pause the plan or fix the plan, the bottom line is that it's quite a comprehensive document. It's a flexible document too. It's a guideline on how you could actually address the issues, and it needs to be done by an independent group. We've got ideas on who could do it, but it's definitely got to be pulled away from the MDBA. We cannot allow the MDBA to keep on marking their own homework, because that's where part of the problem is. A lot of the reports and studies that are done either by the MDBA or otherwise. It's done by one of the groups that they actually give a lot of work to. So of course they're going to come out with what they want them to say. So what we're saying, we want to have an independent assessment of it that is condoned by communities, that is done by our peak groups that actually have got ideas on who could do something like this. But it's not saying we want to walk away from the plan. We're saying let's just sit back, have a look at it, try to actually make sure that what we are targeting at the moment are the targets we need to continue with.
Right, and John, just on that now, the Basin Plan is administered by the MDBA, which is a department of the federal government, and David Littleproud is the relevant minister, the water minister. Would you like to comment?
Oh, look, the problem with David Littleproud, the federal water minister, is that he came in at a time where it was all very controversial, and he was going to be the tough guy coming. He was going to sort the whole thing out. The problem is David Littleproud is completely out of his depth. He doesn't understand the issues associated with the plan. He is focused solely on the political aspects of it, and you've only got to have a look at his performance in the last 2 weeks. Talking about bringing in a tough cop and talking about, the 450 is going to be implemented, and he's thrown another $1.5 billion at it. And 2 days after he made that announcement, which our communities have proven to him that you physically can't get the volumes of water down already, the 2750 that's already been spoken about, this is another 450,000 megalitres on top of it. And that's real water. It's water that has to sit in the dam. So it has got to come from the top of the system to the bottom of the system. For David Littleproud to come out 2 weeks ago it was now, and say that the 450 is going to go ahead, and he's throwing another $1.5 billion at it, And then 2 days after he made that statement, he said this is to give certainty to dairy and rice farmers. Now, that was one of the most laughable statements you could ever make. And it just proves my point that David Littleproud is so far out of touch with reality, it's not funny.
Right.
And then for him, the following week, I think it was a few days before the last Minco meeting, he also came out with another doozy that he's going to bring in a tough cop. You know, he's going to employ some person, throw another $8 million at this group that gets set up, and he is going to go and sort out compliance issues.
Right.
Now, New South Wales did have some issues they needed to sort out, not so much on the southern connected system, but the northern connected system, the northern rivers. There were some major issues there, created by the National Party jumping into bed with some big business, and there's been 12 months of investigating and all the rest, and there's been a lot of outcomes from that.
Yeah.
So that part of the compliance thing, I think, is starting to be addressed. For him to come out now and say we're going to have more compliance, instead of dealing with the real issues lead into how the river systems are collapsing. Let's address that to start with. It's not a fallacy that we make up.
Yep.
And the biggest elephant in this whole equation is the lower lakes.
Well, we'll go on to that now, John. So that is the lower lakes are the elephant in the room. So, look, John, can you just tell us about the lower lakes?
Well, for starters, as I said previously, this whole basin plan, the 2007 Water Act, it was all set on the premise that the lower lakes.
And that's Lake Alexandrina and Albert in South Australia?
That's right, and the Coorong. The Coorong. Yep. So it's the three of them all together, which, by the way, aren't part of the basin plan. Now, you would think that when you're spending $13 billion, the biggest losses out of the whole of the system, which is Lake Alexandrina and Lake Albert, the evaporation losses down there are from 600,000 megs to 1.2 million megs a year, just in evaporation by themselves.
Right.
When Lake Alexandrina is full, there's 2,000 GL or 2 million megalitres, which just so happens to be 3/4 the volume of Hume Dam, is actually sitting at the bottom of the system.
Right.
Now,
and John, so you've got the biggest water using infrastructure in the whole system is not actually part of the basin plan.
It's never been included in the basin plan. The vast majority of the water that we're using under the basin plan is ending up down in the lower lakes and out to sea, the Coorong and out to sea.
Right.
And a lot of it was only a matter of probably 6 weeks ago. We have been saying for years, like this whole thing of the lower lakes being whether it's fresh water or not fresh water,
Yeah.
it's and you would think that if you've got an independent authority, which the MDBA is supposed to be,
Yeah.
they would be the authority that would come out once and for all and conclusively say, yes, it's been fresh water for 3,000 years.
Because there are claims, John, that the lower lakes are naturally fresh water, but of course, and they're maintained as freshwater lakes, which takes up a lot of fresh water to do that with the evaporation losses and running water out to sea. But there's a significant amount of evidence that they're historically not freshwater lakes at all.
Look, it's just been conclusively been reconfirmed by a group of scientists that first of all, the scientist by the name of Peter Jell.
From the University of Ballarat.
12 months ago, he actually came out with a paper. He did a lot of work on the lower lakes from 2006, 7, and his original work confirmed the fact that the lower lakes were estuarine before the barrages were built.
Estuarine varies between salt and fresh water.
That's right.
With the flows and the whether it's tidal flow or freshwater flows.
Because it was actually open to the ocean, so the ocean would, the tide would come in and go out, and of course that's how the whole system worked naturally. In the 30s, the Wisdom decided to put in what they call the barrages, 7.9 kilometres of rock and steel, to separate the Coorong from Lake Alexandrina, and then from then on, they maintained the Lake Albert as being a freshwater system. Now, the basin plan, or the whole thing of the 2007 Water Act, was to maintain it as freshwater, because the evidence that had come out, or the science that was there at the time, which was actually not the correct science, it was actually science that had actually been modified to suit a political goal, and so the whole basin plan was built around trying to maintain fresh water.
These lakes at a freshwater condition when naturally they would be a saline estuarine condition.
And that's what Peter Joel's work proved.
Yep.
He released his updated scientific information that backed up the work he'd done originally, which was actually in contrast to a couple of scientists that actually came out with a political solution for the whole thing, which was to actually say that they were fresh water.
Yeah.
Peter Joel's work was, he released it 12 months ago. It was, and of course that did create a few issues. The CSIRO did a peer review of it, put 4 scientists together to peer review it, and they confirmed exactly what Peter Joel had said.
And just on Professor Peter Joel, he took core samples of the sediments,
which were called diatoms,
in the lake,
yep.
And he studied those sediments, and they've got different names for them, diatoms and whatever else.
Yep.
And those diatoms proved conclusively that
it was an estuarine system.
It's always been a saltwater estuarine system.
The same as every river system in the world has an estuary at the end of it.
Yep.
And to try and say that the lower lakes didn't have an estuary is crazy. The part that concerns me about people like David Littleproud, and also, you know, I think we've got an environment minister now, Susan Ley. She knows the issues back to front. She's seen the damage that has happened to our river systems in the central zone,
yep.
the Goulburn, the Murray and the Edward, and she knows about this, what we've been talking about, the lower lakes being an estuarine system, and that this whole basin plan is all based on a fraud. We need somebody like Susan to start standing up. You know, leading up to the election, she told us time and time again that I wake up in the morning thinking about water, breathing water, you know, and everything that I do from now on will be based around looking after my communities and water. She has got the opportunity. She's in the position now to do something about it. She's in the position now to look after the environment, stop the river system collapsing in the central zone, stop the lies that are going on down the bottom end. I'm not talking about pulling the barrages out, and I think most people aren't talking about doing that. There's plenty of options down there to operate that system better than what it is. You can leave it freshwater a lot of the time, but there's times like where we are at the moment to have the barrage gates open at the moment. We're heading towards one of the worst droughts we've had, maybe even worse than the Millennium Drought. And here we have it, the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, the MDBA, are spruiking about the fact that they've put out 1.2 million megs out the system last year that has gone out to the ocean.
So John, with the lower lakes, because they do use up a lot of fresh water through evaporation and flows out to sea, what's the solution there? Just briefly, just quickly.
Look, the solution, there's an old fellow down there by the name of Ken Jury. Ken Jury is he lives at Goa. He has studied this whole situation for probably as long as, I think he's 80. Anyway, he knows the system back to front. He's put together a strategy, a plan on how you could actually operate the system so that it would look after the lower lakes, it would look after South Australia's water, because part of our problem, of course, is that you've got South Australia, Adelaide, have all got pipelines out of the Murray River down there, and that's their drinking water.
Yep, so they can be managed better without the huge quantity of fresh water that's required at the moment.
If you use Ken's thinking, the strategy that he's put in place, there would be, his claim is that we quite easily, you would save 1.2 million megalitres by just initiating what he's saying. And when you look at it, and I have looked at it, and the logic and common sense behind what he's saying...
And the Basin plan, John, requires 3,250 gigalitres of water.
3,200, yeah.
3,250?
Yep.
Gigalitres of water, and Ken Jury's plan would save how many gigalitres?
1,200.
1,200 gigalitres.
As a start. As a start.
Yep. So John, just in summary, I think it's necessary to pause the plan. That's the first thing.
At the moment, we've got lots of people calling for royal commissions and calling for all sorts of things. And while I can understand the call for a royal commission to actually go into there is a lot of corruption. There is a lot of things that have happened over a long period of time, but a royal commission is not going. We're at the end of our tether. We're past breaking point. So this plan is due to continue for another 5 years. There is another $5 billion of money that the government can keep on waving in front of people's noses. What I'm saying what our group has been saying for quite a period of time, we need to just stop the plan where it is here now. Because if we don't stop it now, we've already gone past breaking point. We've already got people that are actually looking at, well, really, is there any future in irrigated agriculture where we are? And so people are starting to move on. You start losing that critical mass, you will not return it back.
Yeah, it is. It's essential, John, to pause the plan. But I think we'll just wind it up there, John. But I'd like to commend John for his effort. John does a lot of work, and as I said, he attends innumerable meetings, writes innumerable articles, and it's only for the benefit of the local community.
Look, David, there's no good putting one person on a pedestal.
Yep.
There is quite a large number of people that deal in the facts and the actual practicalities of what this plan is all about and what it's causing. And there's quite a large number of people that have actually, same as myself, we've got nothing to gain out of it. All that we've got to gain out of it is to provide a future where there's some opportunities for the next generation.
Good. And look, thanks very much, John.
Thanks, Dave.